The Commonwealth of England was the only period in English history in which the country was officially governed as a republic, lasting just 11 years from 1649 to 1660. It was established following a series of English civil wars between the royalists, who supported the monarchy, and the parliamentarians, some of whom advocated for a parliamentary republic. These conflicts were sparked by King Charles I's disputes with Parliament over taxation, royal prerogative, and religious policy. After the parliamentarians emerged victorious, Charles I was tried and executed. For a brief period, the Commonwealth was governed directly by Parliament. This was followed by the rise of Oliver Cromwell, who assumed power as Lord Protector, effectively ruling as a dictator. After his death, his son Richard Cromwell succeeded him, but lacked the military support that had bolstered his father. With Richard Cromwell's authority weakened, General George Monk, a prominent military leader, orchestrated the restoration of the monarchy. In 1660, King Charles II was invited back to the throne, bringing the Commonwealth to an end. But what if the Commonwealth of England, which existed from 1649 to 1660, had survived to the present day? What if the monarchy had never been restored? Of course, we can't simply go back in time and remove Oliver Cromwell. He was a highly skilled military general whose leadership helped the parliamentarians win the English Civil War. However, to preserve the Commonwealth, it would be crucial to ensure that Cromwell never seized power as a dictator. Even more importantly, the key to a lasting Commonwealth would be strengthening the Rump Parliament and making it more democratic. After Pride's Purge in 1648, only a small radical faction remained in Parliament and no elections were held to refresh its membership. As a result, the Rump was unpopular, unrepresentative, and perceived as corrupt and slow-moving. This weakness ultimately gave Cromwell the justification to dissolve it by force in 1653. In this alternative timeline, several changes would be necessary to ensure that the Commonwealth of England survived beyond 1660. 1. Strengthening the Rump Parliament. After the execution of Charles I in 1649, the Rump Parliament could voluntarily dissolve itself every 2-3 years to hold elections for new MPs in order to maintain legitimacy and public support. 2. Fair representation. Elections should include not only radical Puritans but also less extreme Presbyterians, members of the gentry, and merchants. 3. Local government involvement. Counties and boroughs should have the power to select MPs through local elections, preferably popular or semi-popular processes, even with a limited franchise. Independent election oversight. An independent body such as a committee of respected citizens or a non-partisan organization should supervise the election process to prevent army interference and ensure that results are trusted. 2. Adopting a constitution. The Commonwealth had no formal constitution. Laws were passed ad hoc, leaving power unclear, the army dominant, and governance chaotic. To prevent this, the Commonwealth should adopt a constitution early, 1649-50, perhaps based on the agreement of the people or a more moderate version. Key features of the proposed constitution could include 1. Separation of powers. Clarify the roles and responsibilities of each branch of government, parliament, judiciary, and executive. 2. Parliamentary supremacy and army limits. Clearly establish that Parliament has ultimate legislative power and restrict the military from dominating the government. Basic rights. Guarantee the protection of individual liberties, including property rights, religious freedom, within the cultural norms of the time, and freedom of speech also within the societal limits. Regular elections and sessions. Schedule regular meetings of Parliament and elections to occur on fixed terms to maintain a democratic process. Institutionalize local government. Empower county and town councils to manage local affairs, including taxes, militias, and local courts, thus decentralizing power and reducing the reliance on a single authority figure or the military. These proposed constitutional reforms would significantly enhance the stability, resilience, and democratic nature of the Commonwealth. The absence of a formal constitution had allowed for chaotic governance and dominance by a single entity such as the military. By adopting a constitution early, establishing a separation of powers, safeguarding individual liberties, and decentralizing authority, the Commonwealth could prevent its collapse and ensure its continued existence into the modern era. Another issue that contributed to the Rump Parliament's unpopularity was its pursuit of a radical Puritan agenda, which alienated moderate Presbyterians, Anglicans, and members of the gentry. This led many of these groups to turn towards the royalist cause and fostered widespread discontent with the government. In order to stabilize and bolster the Commonwealth, it is crucial to promote inclusivity by 1. Inviting moderate Presbyterians and members of the Anglican faith to actively participate in Parliament and local councils. 2. avoiding harsh enforcement of religious practices and respecting diverse viewpoints by fostering tolerance towards divergent perspectives. Emphasis should be placed on national development by addressing core issues such as taxation, commerce, and infrastructure rather than enforcing morality. Political coalitions should be encouraged, with the protection of landowners' rights at the forefront. Unnecessary appropriation of estates should be avoided, and compromises should be made between radical and moderate elements of society to foster stability and representation. In order to prevent Cromwell's rise to dictatorship, an alternative timeline could be envisioned where, after the conquest of Ireland and Scotland, Cromwell steps back from politics, instead allowing civilian leaders such as Sir Henry Vane or Bulstrode Whitelocke to take up the leadership role in governing the country. This would prevent the concentration of power in Cromwell's hands and allow for a more balanced political environment with civilian oversight. The key reforms necessary to ensure the survival of the Commonwealth would include 1. Democratic reforms in Parliament with regular elections and wider representation to promote popular sovereignty. 2. Constitutional reforms creating clear powers and responsibilities for each branch of government and establishing checks and balances. 3. Civilian oversight of the military to rein in military interference in government decisions and maintain a balance of power. With these changes, radicalism would diminish and the Commonwealth could develop into a stable oligarchic republic, much like the Dutch Republic. Over time, it could gradually liberalize and democratize from within. Without a monarchy to challenge or restore, the Glorious Revolution of 1688 might never occur, as there would be no king to overthrow. Now that we've ensured the Commonwealth survives, how does the rest of history unfold? The timeline diverges in some significant ways. The Commonwealth of England still engages in imperialism, but as a republic rather than a monarchy, the British Empire in this timeline is likely smaller and less monarchical in character. The 13 American colonies are still established, but because the Commonwealth is a parliamentary republic with more democratic institutions from the start, colonial representation and governance are more inclusive, making revolution unnecessary. As a result, the American Revolution never occurs. Instead of rebelling in the 1770s due to colonial grievances against British rule, the American colonies gradually gain independence from the Commonwealth in the late 1800s. This occurs alongside other territories such as Canada in a slow decolonization process after World War II. But before we jump forward, it's crucial to examine why the American Revolution never takes place in this alternate timeline. 1. No monarchy, no tyrannical king. In our timeline, anger among revolutionaries was directed towards King George III and royal appointees. In this alternative timeline, A. There is no monarchy. Authority lies with Parliament and elected representatives, ensuring accountability and a more democratic process. B. Governors appointed to rule the colonies are answerable to elected bodies instead of a king. C. Colonists no longer perceive themselves as victims of tyranny since parliamentary mechanisms ensure representation, eliminating the ideological basis for rebellion, thus preventing the American Revolution. 2. Representation in Parliament. The lack of colonial representation in Parliament in the 1765 sparked resentment, leading to the slogan, "No taxation without representation." 1. In this alternative timeline, the Commonwealth likely ensures colonial representation in Parliament or regional assemblies, allowing local elites, merchants, and moderate leaders to participate in taxation and policy decisions. Addressing grievances over taxes, Stamp Act, and Townshend Acts through institutional channels prevents them from escalating into a full-fledged revolution. Historically, colonists resented being ruled by a stand crown with no say in their affairs. In the Commonwealth timeline, counties, towns, and colonial assemblies manage local taxation, militias, and courts. Even with a limited electorate, these institutions provide meaningful self-rule. This real autonomy satisfies colonial demands for self-determination, eliminating the need for revolution. Because there is no monarch to rebel against, because representation exists at both national and local levels, and because governance is rooted in parliamentary legitimacy, the American Revolution never happens. Instead, the colonies evolve peacefully within a stable republican system on the path to gradual independence. In this alternate timeline, the Commonwealth initially supports revolutionary France between 1792 and 1799 because of shared ideals. France's overthrow of monarchy and promotion of republicanism align with the Commonwealth's foundational values. However, when Napoleon seizes power in 1799 and crowns himself emperor in 1804, the alliance ends. His creation of hereditary empire betrays republican principles and turns him into a new monarch, an enemy to the Commonwealth's cause. From that point, the Napoleonic Wars unfold much like in our timeline, but with one key difference. Because America remained part of the Commonwealth, having never rebelled, Britain has access to greater manpower, resources, and colonial revenue. This strengthened position allows for a more powerful war effort against Napoleon's expanding empire. How does the American Civil War play out in this timeline? It doesn't happen. Slavery still exists in the southern colonies, just as it did historically. But when the Commonwealth abolishes the slave trade in 1807 and slavery itself in 1833, mirroring Britain's real-world abolition, emancipation is enforced across all territories. There is resistance, especially in plantation economies, but without a separate national government or deep-seated sectional loyalty to a monarchy, large-scale secession fails to gain traction. The central parliament acts decisively, compensates former slave owners as was done historically to ease economic backlash, implements transition programs to shift southern economies toward free labor, uses political negotiation alongside limited military presence to maintain order and prevent rebellion. Because systemic reforms began decades earlier, and because colonial identity is tied more closely to parliamentary governance, the Union remains intact, no confederacy forms, and no civil war erupts. In this alternate timeline, since the United States is still part of the Commonwealth and thus aligned with Britain, its vast population and industrial power enter World War I much earlier. The influx of Commonwealth troops and resources leads to a quicker military breakthrough on the Western Front, meaning the war likely ends in 1916 or early 1917 instead of dragging into 1918. The Central Powers still lose, but with a shorter conflict. As for Russia, although it suffers less strain from an earlier end to the war, internal instability remains severe. Food shortages, inflation, and widespread dissatisfaction with Tsar Nicholas II persist. These conditions still fuel revolution. The February Revolution occurs on schedule, but due to delayed international developments and shifting timelines abroad, full Bolshevik takeover, the October Revolution, is pushed back to 1918 instead of November 1917. With the US not acting as a moderating influence after World War I, the Paris Peace Conference plays out differently. 1. The League of Nations is dominated by the Commonwealth or does not form at all. 2. Hitler rises to power in Germany, perhaps earlier, due to harsher treaty conditions. 3. The Commonwealth is more prepared and better resourced due to the US's support, making the Nazi war effort less successful in Europe. In Asia, the Commonwealth would have taken charge of the Philippines after the revolution and would have fought the Japanese in the Pacific War to protect its territories in Australia, New Zealand, Malaya, Malaysia, Singapore, and Hong Kong. Thanks to the added might of the American Commonwealth team, the Commonwealth is more formidable and better able to defend itself and its colonial possessions. Japan is still defeated in the Pacific War and the bombings still occur, but perhaps with a different timeline of events. After the war, Japan still emerges as a constitutional monarchy and undergoes demilitarization. With its larger military and greater resources due to the inclusion of the American colonies, the Commonwealth plays a more dominant role in defeating Nazi Germany. The Red Army still takes Berlin, but because Western forces advance faster, Soviet-controlled Eastern Germany is smaller than in our timeline. Post-war Europe remains divided, East under Soviet influence, West aligned with the Commonwealth-led bloc. But without a formal Marshall Plan, reconstruction is slower. The Commonwealth still delivers aid through bilateral agreements and regional initiatives, supporting recovery through trade and investment rather than massive financial packages. Rebuilding takes longer, but democracy and economic stability gradually take root in Western Europe. Despite increased aid to the KMT from the Commonwealth, the Communists still emerge victorious in China. The KMT's government continues to struggle, which allows the Communists to consolidate power. In the Korean War, the intervention still takes place, this time led by the Commonwealth and the USSR rather than the United States. North Korea still survives, but with a smaller territory. In this timeline, there's no Vietnam War because the Commonwealth doesn't adopt the US's containment policy. There's no South Vietnam, and modern-day Vietnam develops economically, yet less hostile toward the West. In this timeline, because the Commonwealth has a parliamentary system and stricter lobbying regulations, Zionist groups have less influence than historically in the United States. A Zionist state still emerges in the Middle East in the 1960s or 1970s, largely due to the historic Balfour Declaration of 1917. This results in a different outcome. Israel is established in the northern territories, while a Palestinian state also forms but organized as a semi-presidential system. The two states eventually enter into a peace agreement but remain wary of each other. Although Arab states still harbor resentment toward Israel, the full-scale 1948 Arab-Israeli War and the major regional conflicts that followed do not erupt. With Israel established in a smaller, more defensible territory and less expansionist policy, its presence is less provocative. The Commonwealth's strong diplomatic and military influence in the region acts as a deterrent against invasion. Rather than launching wars, Arab states are encouraged to negotiate or cooperate under Commonwealth mediation. Over time, tensions ease, though peace remains fragile and complex. In this alternate timeline, the Caribbean region is significantly different than historically because major conflicts involving the United States never take place. The Bay of Pigs invasion does not happen, and the Cuban Missile Crisis never develops. Cuba is not colonized or turned into a communist state, with Fulgencio Batista not rising to power as a dictator. The Commonwealth effectively prevents the emergence of autocratic rule in the region. In this timeline, the history of the Americas is different. The 1973 military coup d'etat in Chile does not happen, allowing for a democratic government under Salvador Allende to remain in power. His policies result in a more stable democratic socialist society. Elsewhere in the region, political leaders like Allende are able to win repeated elections, fostering widespread support for democratic socialism across the Americas. They establish stable constitutional governments, leading the region toward a more leftward political alignment without the destabilization caused by coups and dictatorships. The Commonwealth gradually grants independence to its major territories through a peaceful managed process. India, Pakistan, and Southeast Asia, including Malaya, Singapore, and the Philippines, become independent in the 1960s. African nations Kenya, Nigeria, South Africa, and others gain independence throughout the 1960s-1970s. The Middle East sees Palestinian statehood alongside a limited Israel during this period. Jordan and other territories also achieved self-rule. In the Caribbean and Pacific Islands, many of which remained under Commonwealth administration, a path to self-governance is established with democratic institutions in place. By the 1980s, Canada, the United States, and Australia and New Zealand become fully sovereign parliamentary republics, no longer part of the Commonwealth, yet maintain strong diplomatic ties through an evolving international alliance system based on shared values rather than imperial loyalty. In this alternate timeline, the Commonwealth leads the space race, becoming the premier global power in space exploration. This success is based on cooperative programs, groundbreaking technological innovations, and a forward-thinking space program. Collaboration between the Commonwealth states and other nations fosters a climate of cooperation as the world explores space, setting precedents for how space exploration could be achieved. In this alternate timeline, the USSR avoids collapse due to various factors. The Commonwealth's more moderate stance compared to the US reduces pressure and tension. Less interference in proxy wars and regional conflicts lessen the strain on the Soviet economy. The introduction of market-oriented reforms in a socialist framework supports gradual economic improvement. The USSR transitions to a democratic system, implementing decentralized federal structures and allowing for popular elections. As a result, the Soviet Union thrives as a democratic socialist federation, retaining its international standing while coexisting in a world order led by the Commonwealth. The year is 2025, and the world looks very different. Let's begin with Canada. In this timeline, Canada is a parliamentary republic, having gained full independence from the Commonwealth in 1982. Economically, it resembles the Canada of our timeline, prosperous, resource-rich, and socially progressive. However, its geography is more expansive. It includes Alaska, which was purchased by the Commonwealth from Russia in the 19th century and later integrated into Canadian territory. This gives Canada control over vast Arctic resources and a stronger strategic presence in North America's northwest. The United States as we know it does not exist in the same form. After independence in the 1980s, America becomes a parliamentary republic, not a presidential one. There is no president of the United States. Instead, executive power lies with a prime minister chosen by parliament from among elected representatives. Key features: Florida was acquired during or after the Napoleonic Wars when Spain, an ally of France, lost territory to Commonwealth forces. Louisiana was also seized during this period and incorporated into American territory under Commonwealth rule. Political culture is shaped by Westminster-style governance, party-centered, consensus-driven, and less prone to populist rhetoric. Leadership depends on parliamentary confidence rather than mass media campaigns or celebrity appeal. Without strongman politics dominating discourse, American democracy evolves more gradually, emphasizing coalition building over confrontation. In this alternate timeline, the conditions that fueled Donald Trump's rise in our timeline aren't present in America, which is a parliamentary republic rather than a presidential one. Trump, whose rise in our timeline relied heavily on deregulation and New York-centric populism, would not have enjoyed the political climate in this alternative America. At most, he could have gained media prominence or become a backbench politician. Instead, American politics are dominated by centrist coalitions and experienced officials. Early prime ministers might emerge from the Commonwealth's political establishment. This setup discourages divisive figures like Trump from gaining power. Economic development in the Western world's alternate timeline is significantly different, primarily due to the delayed independence of America. Several key factors contribute to this. 1. Slower pre-independence growth. The absence of a Gatsby era in America leads to a slower pre-independence expansion. Profits are shared and taxed by the Commonwealth, reducing capital accumulation. Social and labor policies reminiscent of Britain's influence, early labor protections, strong unions, national health services, lead to reduced inequality but temper capitalist dynamism. After gaining independence in the 1980s, America experiences an economic surge. Economic nationalism and domestic investment boost the emergence of key industries, including tech and energy. The economy moves towards a mixed model blending elements of social democracy, like in Canada, UK, with liberalization policies akin to Thatcherism in Britain. Major cities such as New York, Chicago, Boston, and Philadelphia evolve into significant finance and tech hubs, competing alongside and not overshadowing London's financial supremacy. In the 2000s onwards, America achieves a balanced economy. Its per capita GDP is similar to Canada, but America is no longer the world's dominant economic power. The country invests less in military-industrial projects, redirecting funds towards public services and infrastructure. The social welfare state is robust, with universal healthcare, strong unions, and subsidized education remaining staples. Tech innovation thrives, albeit dispersed across locations like London, Toronto, and New York, unlike our timeline's concentrated Silicon Valley. In this timeline, America becomes a social market economy after 1980, similar to Canada or Germany. This economic model incorporates various elements. Mixed ownership persists in industries such as railways, utilities, and healthcare. Private sectors in tech, finance, and manufacturing experience rapid growth following independence. Consensus-driven coalition-based economic decision-making becomes the norm within governmental institutions. In this timeline, America does not assume the role of the sole superpower. Instead, it is one of several major economic powers, sharing the stage with the core of the Commonwealth, UK, Canada, Australia, the European Union, and Japan. The American economy is export-oriented, closely linked to trade networks within the Commonwealth. The nation shifts its focus toward regional trade between North and South America, prioritizing cooperation and diplomacy over global policing. Other key differences in 2025. Australia and New Zealand, both are parliamentary republics, having peacefully transitioned from the Commonwealth with strong social democracies. Former colonies, most are independent republics, only a few retain constitutional monarchies under local royal families. The Americas, democratic socialism is the dominant political tradition. Stable progressive governments prevail from Canada to Chile. Mexico retains its 1830 borders, larger than in our timeline, and remains a stable, prosperous nation. The first Mexican republic endures into 2025, evolving into a modern federal democracy. Germany reunited, but under West Germany's institutions and constitution, following an earlier collapse of East Germany due to stronger Western engagement. In this timeline, the Soviet Union and other key regions look very different. Soviet Union survives as a market socialist democracy, distancing itself from a more authoritarian past. Israel, weaker than in our timeline, with significantly reduced regional conflict in Gaza. Korean Peninsula, South Korea includes Pyongyang. North Korea exists with Jeonju as its capital city. Commonwealth of England maintains its core territory to the British Isles, abandoning many of the remaining overseas possessions. That's a wrap on the 2025 World Summary. It's been a wild ride through an alternate history where empires evolved, wars ended sooner, and democracies took different shapes. If you ever want a part 2, deeper dives into countries, cultures, or what TikTok looks like without American pop dominance, just say the word. Until then, peace.